As Americans, we cannot allow this to continue. It is time to liberate our communities from the scourge of drug addiction.
Begins with a fracture so deep inside the American justice system that it forces the nation to confront a question no one wants to ask. What happens when the judge himself becomes the criminal? In the early hours of a cold Georgia morning, federal agents breached the office of Judge Marcus Hale, not because of rumor or speculation, but because months of surveillance pointed to a truth too dangerous to ignore. Inside that room, decorated with framed certificates, commendation plaques, and the illusion of public trust, they found the first thread of a conspiracy stretching far beyond the walls of a courthouse. This is the moment where perception collapses, where law and crime collide, and where the line between protector and predator vanishes. Federal forensic teams uncovered dozens of shell companies linked to Hale consulting firms, logistics groups, research nonprofits, property management entities, each designed not to serve the public, but to launder cartel profits. Transaction analysis revealed irregular flows totaling tens of millions routed through intermediaries who had no discernible business activity aside from receiving and transferring funds. Former law enforcement officers appear in these records not as defenders of justice, but as gatekeepers who ensured certain traffickers avoided scrutiny. This layer of the investigation reveals the machinery of systemic corruption, powered not by dramatic betrayals, but by quiet compliance. Investigators also trace communications between Hale and regional officers who appeared to adjust patrol patterns, sabotage investigations, or reroute sensitive intelligence to cartel handlers. These exchanges were buried beneath the routine chatter of administrative operations, making them nearly invisible until the digital audit illuminated their patterns. Each discovery formed a mosaic of complicity that could no longer be dismissed as isolated misconduct. If the audience wants to know how deep corruption must run before an entire system bends, they need only observe how seamlessly Hale's network blended into legitimate structures. The expanded investigation demonstrates that criminal infiltration rarely looks like cinematic chaos. It looks like organized efficiency. It survives by being predictable, professional, and deeply integrated. And the lesson for viewers is clear corruption thrives when oversight becomes a formality instead of a safeguard. The more investigators uncovered, the more evident it became that Hale's influence was only the surface of a structural infection. What lay beneath would soon justify a level of coordinated federal action few anticipated. The coordinated raids that followed were not impulsive reactions, they were the culmination of a carefully synchronized strategy designed to dismantle a network thriving under layers of legal protection. At dawn, teams from the FBI, ICE, DHS, and state task forces descended simultaneously on warehouses, safe houses, courthouses, and private residences across multiple counties. From a third-person perspective, these operations resembled a cinematic sequence, dozens of teams moving with precision communications encrypted each unit, neutralizing targets who had long believed themselves untouchable. If viewers want to truly grasp the scale of this takedown, they must imagine entire neighborhoods shifting from silence to federal lockdown within minutes. The raids targeted more than cartel operatives. They targeted the infrastructure that enabled corruption. Officers seized files from district offices, arrested compromised deputies, and secured digital servers containing years of suppressed reports. Locations once considered secure police stations, administrative buildings, courthouse storage rooms became active crime scenes. The element of surprise was essential. Any delay would have given insiders time to destroy evidence or escape. For years, these networks operated under the assumption that their connections to Hale insulated them from prosecution. That illusion evaporated the moment agents forced entry. Across the state, investigators recovered firearms, caches, drug shipments, falsified case records, and financial ledgers that validated months of investigative work. More importantly, they discovered communication chains linking corrupt officers to cartel cells, planning to expand operations deeper into the southeastern corridor. If the audience wants to understand how strategic these raids were, they need to consider that every location hit represented a piece of a larger puzzle, one that when assembled, revealed the architecture of an empire built on betrayal. The The coordinated takedown shattered the protective web surrounding Hale's network. It also revealed a broader truth: a system can tolerate corruption only until the cost to public safety becomes too high to ignore. Once that threshold was crossed, the machinery of federal enforcement moved swiftly and without hesitation. These raids marked the end of a long hidden chapter and the beginning of a much more complicated reckoning. Numbers rarely tell emotional stories, yet in this case they deliver a chilling portrait of systemic collapse. The official post-raid inventory reported quantities that would be implausible in fiction, but undeniable in evidence logs. Agents recovered nearly 2 tons of narcotics, cocaine, fentanyl, methamphetamine stored in warehouses tied directly to Hale's intermediaries. They seized more than 300 firearms, many unregistered or modified for cartel use. Cash reserves exceeded $100 million, spread across safe houses disguised as legitimate businesses. If viewers want to understand the gravity of this scandal, these numbers form the unfiltered truth. In addition to physical seizures, investigators uncovered thousands of digital records, documenting transactions, encrypted communications, and falsified legal documents. The data mapped out years of collusion between Hale cartel liaisons and the 21 officers implicated in the conspiracy. Their roles varied: some facilitated drug transport, others manipulated case files, while a select few rerouted intelligence to ensure cartel activities remained invisible. The level of coordination demonstrated that the operation was not an opportunistic scheme, but a fully structured system functioning beneath public institutions. The numbers also highlight how deeply public trust had been violated. Each weapon, each shipment, each bribe reflects a decision that placed personal gain over community safety. These figures are not abstract. They represent threats that passed undetected through the very institutions designed to stop them. If the audience wants to grasp the long-term impact, they must recognize that every seized asset marks a failure in oversight, accountability, and internal control. From a third-person vantage, the scene unfolds like the opening shot of a crime documentary. Agents moving quietly, the hum of encrypted radios, the snap of evidence bags sealing away the lies that governed Hale's courtroom. If the viewer wants to understand just how deep systemic corruption can run, they must stay alert, because what lies ahead is darker, wider, and far more calculated than a single compromised official. Every discovery in that office, the coded ledgers, the encrypted drives, the off-the-books documents, serves as both evidence and warning. It reveals a judiciary unable to defend itself from infiltration, a frightening reminder that authority can be purchased, bent, or corrupted when left unchecked. The report concludes with the most significant statistic: the sheer volume of corrupted legal outcomes. Cases, dismissed evidence, suppressed offenders, released, each decision manipulated by Hale's influence. This numerical record provides a devastating insight. When corrupt power scales up, the consequences multiply beyond individual misconduct, shaping outcomes for entire communities. The numbers do not merely expose a criminal enterprise, they quantify the cost of institutional decay. Analyzing the power network behind Hale's corruption requires more than recounting criminal actions. It requires understanding the architecture that allowed these actions to flourish. From a third-person lens, the network resembles a pyramid, inverted broad at the top, narrow at the bottom, because influence, not hierarchy, determined its structure. At the highest levels were cartel strategists who viewed the judiciary not as an obstacle, but as an acquisition target. Beneath them stood regional coordinators, political intermediaries, and compromised officers who executed orders while maintaining the illusion of normal operations. Hale occupied the central node not because he wielded the most force, but because he controlled the most leverage. His rulings could reshape law enforcement priorities, shield traffickers, and neutralize investigations. That leverage made him indispensable, and his office became the perfect fulcrum where illicit power met institutional authority. If viewers wish to understand how corruption becomes systemic, they must examine how easily influence can override procedure when unchecked. The network's strength derived from its adaptability. When scrutiny increased in one area, operations shifted elsewhere. When officers became liabilities, they were replaced. When financial pathways risked exposure, funds were rerouted through new corporate shells. This flexibility ensured longevity, allowing the system to absorb shocks without collapsing. What investigators found was not a fragile cartel appendage, but a resilient hybrid organization functioning inside the state it was undermining. The most alarming insight is that the network thrived partly due to institutional blind spots, places where trust replaced verification and authority replaced accountability. Corruption did not spread because individuals failed. It spread because the system assumed its own immunity, and that assumption is what allowed criminals to weaponize bureaucracy against itself. Here lies the core value for viewers. power without oversight becomes a liability, not an asset. The network surrounding Hale demonstrates how quickly authority can be exploited when vigilance is replaced by routine. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for preventing the next infiltration because networks like these do not vanish, they evolve. The cleansing of government institutions that followed the exposure of Hale's network was not merely administrative, it was ideological. The state faced a reckoning that demanded more than arrests. It required dismantling the cultural and structural conditions that allowed corruption to take root. From a third-person perspective, reform efforts spread like controlled burns across agencies targeting policies, personnel oversight mechanisms, and public narratives that had silently supported systemic vulnerability. If viewers want to understand what institutional purification looks like, they must view it as both destruction and reconstruction. Independent review boards reevaluated hundreds of past rulings associated with Hale overturning cases tainted by manipulated evidence or corrupt intervention. Law enforcement agencies purged officers with suspicious financial histories or unexplained case anomalies. Legislative committees introduced new transparency requirements for judicial reporting, financial disclosures, and interagency communication logs. These actions represented more than procedural updates. They symbolized an acknowledgement that corruption is not an aberration, but a possibility that must be continuously guarded against. Yet the deeper transformation occurred in public consciousness. Citizens who once viewed corruption as distant now recognized its potential proximity. Trust once taken for granted had to be rebuilt. The state launched community oversight panels, whistleblower protection expansions, and forensic auditing protocols designed to prevent future infiltration. Each measure reflected a shift from reactive governance to proactive defense. This cleansing phase underscores an essential truth. Institutions do not regain integrity through punishment alone, they restore it through vigilance and cultural change. The fallout from the Hale scandal became a catalyst for long overdue reform, proving that systemic failure can inspire systemic resilience if leaders choose accountability over optics. This moment matters because it reframes everything the audience assumes about safety and justice. When those sworn to uphold the law secretly orchestrate its collapse, the entire community becomes vulnerable. The early findings in Hale's office are more than scandal. They are a mirror reflecting the fragility of institutional integrity. And if the audience wants to know what was truly hidden behind Hale's rulings, his late-night meetings, his unexplained financial patterns, they must prepare for revelations in the next section. For now, the undeniable truth is this corruption does not erupt suddenly. It grows quietly, protected by silence and empowered by systems too slow to notice the rot spreading within them. What remains for viewers to consider is whether these measures will endure. History suggests that corruption adapts faster than reform, unless society remains engaged, informed, and willing to question authority. The cleansing may have begun, but its success depends on collective memory and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths before they metastasize again. The conclusion to this story is not a dramatic final scene, but an ongoing confrontation with uncomfortable reality. The downfall of Marcus Hale and his network forced citizens and institutions alike to face the fragility of democratic systems. From a third-person perspective, the aftermath unfolds as both closure and awakening. The trials ended with severe sentences, the public saw unprecedented transparency measures enacted, and federal oversight expanded across regions previously considered low risk. But the most important legacy is the understanding that corruption is not a distant threat, it is a possibility that grows wherever complacency takes hold. As investigations concluded, analysts warned that the Hale network was not an isolated phenomenon, but a symptom of structural vulnerabilities present across multiple jurisdictions. Preventing the next infiltration requires more than enforcement. It requires culture shifts, technological modernization, and continuous public pressure. If viewers want to understand the future trajectory of justice systems, they must recognize that power without scrutiny is inherently unstable. The strength of a democracy is measured not by its laws, but by its ability to enforce them impartially. The story resolves with a stark but empowering reminder: systems can be rebuilt stronger after they break, but only if the public demands accountability at every stage. The reforms initiated after the scandal represent a new phase of institutional vigilance, one that insists on transparency, independent review, and digital auditing frameworks capable of detecting anomalies long before they accumulate into crises. Whether these reforms will endure depends on sustained civic engagement. So the final question posed to viewers is both open and urgent. Will society remain alert enough to prevent the next Marcus Hale, or will history repeat itself under a new name and a new facade? Their answer shapes not only the future of justice, but the resilience of the system designed to protect them. Thank you for watching, analyzing, and challenging the narrative. If you have questions, theories, or insights you want explored in future investigations, leave them below. Your perspective strengthens the conversation. The downfall of Judge Marcus Hale exposed one of the most calculated infiltrations of the American justice system in recent memory. What began as a routine corruption probe quickly unraveled into a multi-layered criminal ecosystem, where judicial authority, cartel financing, and compromised law enforcement operated as a single machine. The raid on Hale's office revealed encrypted ledgers, shell companies, and patterns of rulings engineered to protect traffickers rather than prosecute them. As the investigation expanded, agents mapped a network that included 21 corrupted officers, financial conduits stretching across multiple states, and distribution routes responsible for nearly 2 tons of narcotics. Coordinated federal raids dismantled the network's infrastructure, seizing weapons, cash, and documents that proved the system had been manipulated for years. The aftermath forced courts, agencies, and lawmakers to confront deep structural weaknesses, blind spots that allowed criminal influence to thrive under the guise of routine procedure. Reforms followed, but public trust could not be restored by policy alone. The case underscores a critical truth: corruption grows where oversight sleeps. Hale's network may have fallen, but the vulnerabilities it exposed remain a warning. The question now is whether society will stay vigilant enough to prevent the next infiltration, or whether history will repeat itself under a different name. And here is the grounding statement the viewer needs. When justice is corrupted at the top, the damage spreads downward through every level it touches. The shock of this realization is the foundation for everything that follows, reminding the audience that the unraveling of a single office can expose the weaknesses of an entire system. The heart of the scandal sits inside a seemingly ordinary office, Judge Marcus Hale's private chamber, a place designed for deliberation and justice, yet converted into the command center of a criminal apparatus. From a third-person view, the space no longer resembles a judicial workplace, but a hybrid between a legal sanctuary and a cartel backroom. Files are arranged not by case categories, but by coded tags. Phones are not for clerks, but for encrypted messaging, and visitors do not arrive seeking fairness, but seeking protection. If the audience wants to understand the anatomy of institutional decay, this room is the autopsy table. Here, every object betrays its owner. The central story revolves around how Hale transformed his authority into currency. Instead of verdicts guided by truth, he issued rulings shaped by cartel interests. Instead of safeguarding evidence, he suppressed it. Instead of prosecuting corrupt officers, he shielded them. Behind every lenient sentence, every dismissed motion, every sudden procedural error is the fingerprint of a man who no longer served the law, but served those who paid to manipulate it. Anyone unwilling to look beyond the surface might have mistaken his actions for incompetence, but those who examined the pattern saw deliberate design. The scandal's core reveals how crime infiltrates through quiet deals, subtle gestures, and carefully calibrated favors. Hale did not act loudly, he acted consistently. His office became the junction where cartel runners, compromised detectives, and political intermediaries converged. The arrangement worked because it relied on mutual silence. For years, the system rewarded Hale with prestige, while ignoring signs of misconduct, unexplained assets, luxury travel masked as conferences, and sudden bursts of influence over law enforcement decisions. Such anomalies are often dismissed until someone chooses to connect them. If the viewer wishes to grasp why this case matters far beyond Georgia, they must follow the trail expanding outward from this single room. They must watch how a corrupted center infects the mechanisms around it, how a judge's authority becomes the fuel that powers networks no citizen ever voted for. The truth is simple: when the core of a system is compromised, every decision radiating from it becomes tainted. The office of Marcus Hale is not just a crime scene, it is proof that failure at the center can distort an entire landscape. The investigation widened in a way that mirrors the structure of modern organized crime, hidden behind layers shielded by bureaucracy, protected by the illusion of normalcy. From the moment agents seized Hale's encrypted drives, analysts began connecting digital traces that had been unnoticed or ignored for years. What started as a judicial corruption probe rapidly evolved into a forensic mapping of money trails, corporate structures, and clandestine communications stretching across several states. If the viewer wants to understand how criminal power embeds itself into institutions, they must follow these threads as investigators did patiently, relentlessly, and without assuming anything was accidental.